I stood in that doorway, clutching the test results in my fist so hard the paper had started to tear. Stage 4. No hope without immediate, expensive treatment. My wife, Emily, was in the living room, weak from another round of coughing. She didn't know I was about to beg our children for help. I didn't want her to know, not yet. Eric and Laura were sitting at the dining table when I walked in, both staring at their phones like nothing in the world could touch them. My heart pounded against my ribs like it was trying to escape. "It's your mother," I said, my voice catching. "She's dying." Eric didn't even look up. "That's your problem, Dad." Laura just nodded without a word, her fingers still scrolling. No emotion, no reaction. Just cold, polished indifference. I blinked, not believing what I'd just heard. "Are you serious right now? It's your mother. She gave you everything. We both did." Eric finally looked at me like I'd interrupted a board meeting. "You made your choices. We're not obligated to fix your mess." I felt my knees nearly buckle, my throat closed, and I couldn't breathe. I looked at Laura, my little girl who used to run into my arms after school, now a stranger in designer shoes. "You haven't said a damn word," I said, desperate. "You're really going to stand there and let her die?" She finally looked up, but it was like she was looking through me. "We can't afford it," she said quietly. "We're trying to build our lives, Dad." That was it. No emotion, no regret. Just excuses. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break something. I wanted them to see her face the moment the doctor told her the truth. I wanted them to feel that punch to the gut that I'd been carrying since the day we left that hospital. But they didn't feel anything. I dropped the report on the table. It hit the glass with a thud that felt louder than a gunshot. Eric flicked it away with one finger like it was a fast food receipt. "You want me to drain my savings for someone who's already halfway gone? That's not smart business." I turned and walked out, the paper crumpled in my hand again. My head was spinning. Emily's breathing had been getting worse. Her eyes already had that hollow look. She needed treatment now, and our kids, our damn kids, had just written her off like a liability. In the car, I sat there gripping the steering wheel so tight my hands went numb. Eric's voice echoed in my head. "Your mess, Dad." Laura's silence was worse. It screamed louder than any words could. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there until the streetlights came on. Then I drove home. When I walked into the house, Emily was asleep on the couch under that old quilt she loved. Her face looked so peaceful, too peaceful, like the calm before the storm. I stood in the kitchen and stared at the phone. I didn't have much, but I still had some fight left. I called the bank first, then a second, then a third. Nobody wanted to give an old man a loan with no assets, not unless I put up the house. Next, I called a dealer and sold my car, the same one we'd driven to Laura's high school graduation. "It's old," I said, trying to smile through the ache, "but it runs." By morning, I had just enough to get her started on treatment. It wasn't enough to save her, not unless a miracle showed up, but it was something. I wouldn't let her die without trying. At the hospital, she looked up at me and smiled. "You look tired, Robert," she said, her voice barely more than a whisper. "I'm okay," I lied, sitting down next to her and holding her hand. "We're figuring it out. The kids send their love." She nodded, her eyes closing again. She believed me. She always believed me, and I hated them for making me lie to her. Emily's hand was cold in mine, and every time her fingers twitched in her sleep, I found myself praying it wasn't the last time I'd feel it. The machines beeped soft and steady beside her. I sat there through the night, watching the numbers on the monitor like they were counting down the seconds I had left with her. I hadn't told her the full truth. I couldn't. I couldn't bring myself to tell her that Eric and Laura had already decided she wasn't worth saving, that their lives, filled with cocktails and new apartments and weekend spa trips, were just too busy to make room for their dying mother. She still believed in them. She still asked how they were doing. She still smiled when I made up lies about texts they never sent. The doctor came in around 6. "You should go home, Mr. Collins, get some rest." Rest. What the hell did that even mean anymore? Instead, I walked the halls until the vending machines flickered on. I bought a coffee that tasted like burnt rubber and drank it anyway. Then I went outside just as the sun was beginning to rise over the hospital parking lot, and I made a decision. I wasn't just going to sit back and let them pretend this never happened. I wasn't going to let them walk away from what they did like it meant nothing. I'd spent my whole life giving them everything. And now, when it was time to give something back, not even to me, but to the woman who carried them, fed them, raised them, they chose silence. I would not let that be free. Back home, I pulled out the old box from under the bed, the one with the tax folders, mortgage records, bank statements, receipts from tuition payments, Laura's wedding invoices, Eric's car insurance papers, all of it. I sat at the kitchen table and started making a list, not a to-do list, a war map. Every dollar I spent on them, every sacrifice Emily and I made so they could have a future. Then I called Ron. Ron was an old friend from my years working in maintenance at the district office. He went to law school late, always said he owed me for covering his shifts when his son was in the hospital. "You serious about this?" he asked after I told him what I wanted. "I'm done playing the nice guy," I said. There was a pause. Then I know where to start. The next few days were a blur of paperwork and research. Ron dug into Eric's firm. I started checking Laura's credit history. I already knew she was living beyond her means, but I didn't know how deep the cracks went. Turns out, she was barely keeping her head above water. Maxed out cards, 2 missed mortgage payments, a luxury lease on a car she couldn't afford. Perfect. At the hospital, I didn't say a word about any of it. Emily didn't need to carry that weight. I just sat with her, read old books out loud, told her stories about our first apartment in Cicero, the time the roof leaked and we used pots to catch the rain. She smiled, even laughed once. I lived for that sound. And every time I stepped out of that hospital room, I remembered their silence, their absence at her bedside, their cold words echoing in my head like gunshots. That night, I sat in the dark living room with a yellow legal pad on my lap. Emily's picture was on the table next to me, one from 20 years ago, her holding Laura's tiny hand, both of them smiling at the camera like the world couldn't touch them. I traced the edge of the photo with my finger, then I turned to a new page on the pad. Across the top, I wrote one word: repayment. They wanted to play cold? I'd show them what cold really meant. I closed the notebook and leaned back in the chair. I knew what I had to do next. The next morning, I was at Ron's office before he even flipped the sign to open. He looked at me over his glasses, sipping burnt coffee out of a chipped mug like it was just another Tuesday. "You're not here to chat, are you?" he said. "Nope," I replied, dropping the folder onto his desk. "Let's move." Inside the folder was everything I'd gathered: copies of payment records, signed checks, tuition receipts, even the contract I co-signed for Laura's first business loan. She defaulted on it within a year, and I had to clean it up quietly so it wouldn't hit her credit. I never even told Emily about that one, just paid it off and carried on. Ron flipped through the papers, whistling under his breath. "You kept receipts?" "For everything," I said. "Every dollar I ever spent on them, and I want it all back." He leaned back, thinking. "You're serious about suing your own kids?" "No," I said, steady. "I'm serious about justice. I'm not doing this to punish them. I'm doing this because I'm done being the man they walk over." He nodded slowly. "All right. Then here's what we do. First, we build a civil case. Breach of moral obligation. It's not easy, but with the records you have and the context, we can frame this as intentional abandonment. Neglect in the face of terminal illness. Courts won't like that. And public records? We'll file the suit publicly," he said. "They'll both get served. It'll hit their pride before it hits their pockets. And if we're lucky, the media picks up on it." That made me pause, not because I was afraid of the attention, but because Emily would have hated that. She was private, quiet. She never liked drama. But she also didn't believe in letting people get away with cruelty. I took a breath and nodded. "Do it." Ron tapped his pen twice on the folder and got to work. By the time I got home, it was past noon. I reheated some soup Emily had made a few weeks back and sat at the table staring at the clock. It was one of those old ones with the swinging pendulum. We bought it at a flea market in Wisconsin on our 25th anniversary. She loved that damn clock. Said it gave the house a heartbeat. It ticked and talked like nothing had changed, but everything had. I pulled out the legal pad again, flipping to a fresh page. I made 2 columns, Eric and Laura. Under Eric, I listed every deal Ron was investigating. We'd already found 2 shell companies connected to his name with irregular money transfers. Under Laura, I jotted the addresses of the debt collectors tied to her accounts. They thought their lives were untouchable, polished, picture perfect, but their house of cards was already swaying in the wind. I was going to blow hard enough to bring it all down. That night at the hospital, Emily looked worse. Her skin was pale, her breathing shallow. But when I walked in, she still smiled. "How was your day?" she asked, her voice no louder than a whisper. "Productive," I said, sitting beside her. I kissed her forehead. "You don't worry about a thing." "I always knew you'd take care of us," she murmured, "even when it's hard." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I got you," I said, "always." She squeezed my hand, barely. After she drifted off, I stayed there, watching her chest rise and fall, slow and uneven. I wanted to freeze time, to rewind it, to erase what Eric and Laura had done. But I couldn't. So instead, I promised her silently, "They won't get away with this. Not in this life. Not on my watch." And that night, as I left the hospital, I took one last look at the city skyline. It was time to start pulling threads. Let their lives unravel, just like they let her fade away. The next morning I started pulling the threads, one by one, Eric first. I didn't know much about corporate finance, but I knew enough to recognize when numbers didn't make sense. Ron's contact, Susan, a quiet analyst from Eric's firm, agreed to meet me in a diner on the south side, far from the glitzy towers where Eric played king of the castle. She showed up looking nervous, eyes darting like she thought someone had followed her. I didn't blame her. She was risking a lot. "I don't know how long I can stay," she said as she sat across from me, clutching her coffee cup like it might shield her. "You've already done more than enough," I said. "Just tell me what you know." She hesitated, then opened her bag and pulled out a small notepad. No digital records. Smart girl. She flipped to a page and slid it across the table. "He's been bragging about deals no one's seen, clients no one can verify, and these transfers," she tapped her pen, "they don't match anything we've filed. Could he be hiding income?" She nodded. "If the right person starts asking questions, he'll panic." "Good," I said, sliding the notepad back. "That's exactly what I want." I left Susan with a quiet thank you and drove straight to Ron's office. He was already leaning back in his chair, phone pressed to his ear. When I walked in, he hung up and smiled. "Laura's drowning." I raised an eyebrow. "That fast?" "She missed 3 payments last quarter. Designer credit cards maxed out. She's putting on a show, but she's slipping fast." I sat down, pulling the yellow pad from my coat. "Time to take the next step." Ron nodded. "You want to squeeze them publicly or behind closed doors?" "Both," I said. "Let them sweat in private and burn in public." He leaned forward, his eyes sharp. "Then we start with anonymous tips, financial regulators, credit agencies. That'll get things moving without your name attached." Make it happen. Back home, I sat at the dining room table and looked around the quiet house. Emily's favorite candle sat untouched by the window, still half burned from the last night we had dinner together at home. She used to light it after every meal, said it helped her think. I lit it now. I needed to think. I opened the legal pad again and started drawing connections. Eric's firm was on the edge. If the audit Ron predicted came through, he'd be done. Laura? She was even closer to the edge. All it would take was one push. I wrote creditors under her name, circled it, and drew a thick red arrow toward public exposure. She cared more about her image than her finances. It was all House of Cards vanity. I wasn't just attacking their wallets. I was aiming for their egos. That was where they lived. That was where it would hurt. At the hospital, Emily had started to fade. Her voice was weaker, her fingers colder. She didn't talk much now. Mostly she just smiled when I came in. And every time I told her, "They're doing fine. They ask about you." and she'd nod, her lips twitching like she wanted to believe it. She died thinking they still loved her. That night I went home and started writing. Not letters of forgiveness, letters of fire, one to Eric's company's compliance department, summarizing the irregularities, no names, just enough smoke to start a blaze. One to Laura's largest creditors, detailing her purchases, her defaults, her fragile position. And when I dropped them in the mailbox, the weight of those envelopes felt nothing like guilt. They felt like justice. This was just the beginning. I'd made them believe they could live without consequences. Now, they were going to learn what consequences really looked like. 3 days later, the first crack appeared. I was sitting in a quiet corner of Lincoln Park feeding stale bread to pigeons and pretending not to care about the world when my phone buzzed. It was Ron. "Eric's firm is under audit," he said, voice sharp, urgent. "Someone triggered a formal review. He's panicking. Calls flying left and right." I smiled and leaned back against the bench, the cold wood pressing into my spine. Good. Let him panic. He's asking around, trying to find out who did it. "He won't," Ron chuckled. "No, he won't. You're clean. But this won't stay quiet. His reputation's about to get dragged." I hung up and stared at the sky. It was gray and heavy, like the city was holding its breath. I knew that feeling. I'd held mine for weeks, watching, waiting, suffering. Now it was their turn. Later that afternoon, I went back to the hospital. Emily's bed was surrounded by machines that hummed and blinked like they were trying to keep her alive out of habit. Her eyes opened when I walked in, but she didn't speak, just smiled, faint, gentle. I held her hand and sat beside her. I told her made-up stories, that Eric had called and asked about her, that Laura sent flowers, pink ones, her favorite. Lies. Beautiful, painful lies. I hated them for making me lie to her. When I left, I walked home. No cab, no bus. Just 10 miles of frozen sidewalks and silent rage. That night, I poured myself a glass of whiskey, sat at the kitchen table, and flipped open the yellow pad again. I crossed a red X over Eric, audit, initiated. Then I drew a new arrow, Laura, pressure from creditors. The next morning, Laura called me, not to ask how her mother was doing, not to apologize. She called because she was scared. "Dad, have you heard anything weird about me? Like, financially?" Her voice shook slightly, the polished veneer cracking just a little. "No," I said flatly. "Why?" "I got a call from a debt agency I've never worked with. They knew about the lease, the missed payments, stuff they shouldn't know." I paused. Let her sweat in that silence. "You okay, Laura?" "Yeah, I don't know what's happening. Things are tight right now." Tight. That word made me want to laugh. Tight was sleeping on a pull-out couch for 6 years because we couldn't afford to fix the bedroom floor. Tight was rationing groceries so Eric could get braces and Laura could join the swim team. They had no idea what tight meant. "You think someone's watching you?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "I don't know. Maybe. If you hear anything, will you let me know?" I forced a soft chuckle. "Sure thing, sweetheart." When I hung up, I stared at the phone for a long time. She was unraveling. I could hear it in her voice, the fear, the realization that maybe she wasn't untouchable after all. Good. She hadn't been there when her mother's lungs started failing. She hadn't called when the doctors stopped offering good news. She hadn't cried when I told her that we were out of time. And now she wanted help? I lit a fire in the fireplace and tossed another copy of her wedding bill into the flames. $48,000, a sunset ceremony, a string quartet, lobster for 200 guests. Emily and I had put up the house to pay for it. Laura had never said thank you. Now she was calling for favors. I watched the flames eat the paper slowly, then rose to grab another document, a copy of the promissory note I'd signed for her failed boutique venture. She never paid it back. She never even mentioned it again. The fire welcomed that one too. One by one, the records of my sacrifices burned, but the justice, that was only just heating up. The next morning I found myself standing in front of the same mailbox where I'd dropped the first batch of letters. This time, my hand didn't hesitate. I slid in a new envelope, one aimed straight at the creditors circling Laura's world like vultures. Inside, a detailed summary of her outstanding debts, 3 missed payments on her condo, and the boutique lease she was months behind on. No name, no return address, just facts and a little push. Let them do what they do best. Back home, I paced the living room. Emily's photo stared back at me from the mantel, her smile soft, her eyes so full of life it made my chest hurt. I sat down and whispered, "They'll know what it means to be left behind." By noon, Ron called again. I could hear the excitement in his voice. Eric's boss just suspended him. They're going through every file with a fine-tooth comb. Looks like some of the shady transactions are surfacing faster than we expected. Any charges? Not yet. But he's sweating, and Laura? He paused. She's getting calls. I got word from one of my guys that 2 collectors have already threatened legal action. I closed my eyes and nodded slowly. Good. Robert, you're aware this could destroy them, right? I opened my eyes and stared at the ceiling. I'm not destroying them, Ron. I'm showing them the mirror. That night, I didn't go to the hospital. Not because I didn't want to, because I couldn't. I didn't want Emily to see the fire in my eyes, the fury building deeper than grief. She deserved peace in her final days, not to see the war I was waging in her name. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table with a stack of photos from the old drawer, Eric's high school graduation, Laura at her sweet 16, Emily standing between them, beaming, arms around their shoulders like the whole world was hers. Those were the people I'd fought for, not the cold strangers who refused to lift a finger when she needed them most. The phone rang just past midnight. I let it ring once, twice. On the third, I picked up without speaking. Dad? It was Laura. Her voice was shaky, desperate. They're threatening to garnish my account. My landlord left a notice on my door. What the hell is going on? Sounds like you're in a bit of trouble, I said calmly. I don't understand it. This isn't normal. They know things no one should know. My bank called. One of my cards was frozen. Frozen? Can you help me? Please? I didn't answer right away. I stared at the photo of her and Emily on the couch, Laura no more than 8, curled into her mother's side. You didn't come to see her, I said. What? You didn't even call her, Laura. Not once. You let her die thinking you loved her, and now you want help? Her breath hitched. I didn't know it was that bad. You knew enough. You chose not to care. The line went quiet. Then, Dad, I'm sorry, I messed up. I thought she'd pull through. I didn't think. You didn't think, I said flatly. You're right. You didn't. I'll do anything. Just help me fix it. Please. I'll think about it, I said, and hung up. I sat there in the silence, gripping the phone until my knuckles turned white. My heart was pounding, not out of anger, but something colder. Satisfaction. They were starting to feel it, but I wasn't done. Not yet. Eric hadn't even called. That was about to change. Eric didn't call that night, or the next. But I knew he was feeling it. I knew the silence wasn't peace. It was pressure. The kind of pressure that builds up behind glass until it cracks wide open. Ron confirmed it the following morning. His firm froze his accounts. They're distancing themselves fast. Rumors are flying inside. Internal memo went out. Strict compliance sweep. He's not just under review now, Robert. He's radioactive. Good, I said. Let him sweat. I hung up and drove straight to the cemetery. Emily hadn't been buried yet, but I needed to see the place. I needed to stand where she'd rest and make another silent vow that this wasn't over until they felt every inch of pain they handed her. I stood there for half an hour, just staring at the empty plot with her name already carved into the stone. I pictured the last time she smiled, the way her fingers trembled when she reached for mine. She never got to hear "I love you" from her own children before she died. But they were going to hear from me. When I got home, I pulled out the notebook again. The list was growing shorter. I'd crossed off Laura, Creditors closing in, apartment at risk, lines of credit blocked. Now it was Eric's turn to bleed. I opened a new page and wrote his name across the top. Under it, I added 2 words: public exposure. His whole identity was built on prestige, fancy titles, high-level circles, the illusion of control. That illusion was cracking, and I had the hammer in my hand. I started calling around, not to strangers, to people I knew from my old life, guys who owed me favors, guys who had ears in the city. And the stories started surfacing. Eric had cut corners, made deals under the table. There were names, real ones, attached to fake transactions. He thought he was invincible, but invincible people don't make enemies. I didn't even have to push hard. All it took was a single anonymous message sent through one of Ron's trusted contacts, not with details, just a nudge in the right direction. Look at Eric Collins' real estate acquisitions between May and September, then ask who signed off on them. And then I waited. The next night my phone rang. I let it buzz until it stopped. Then it rang again. Same number. Finally I picked up. Dad. It was Eric. His voice didn't sound like it usually did. No arrogance, no control. Just panic. I need to talk to you. Something's going on. My firm, they froze everything. They won't return my calls. People are whispering, avoiding me like I've got a target on my back. I said nothing. Just listened. Did someone say something about me? Do you know anything? I could hear his breath, fast and uneven. I pictured him pacing some overpriced apartment with a glass wall view of a city that was starting to turn its back on him. You feeling cornered? I asked, voice steady. I don't know what the hell's happening. All I know is I'm losing everything. My reputation, my job, my credibility. Dad, if you know something, please tell me. Please. You told me it was my problem, remember? Silence. I begged you to help your mother, I said, my voice low. She was dying, and you looked me in the eye and said it wasn't your problem. Dad, I was wrong. Yes, you were, and now, so am I. Please, I didn't mean... I hung up, and for the first time in weeks I slept without waking in the middle of the night. But I wasn't finished. Justice wasn't just about knocking them down. It was about making sure they couldn't get back up without remembering exactly why they fell. The next morning I stood in front of the mirror shaving, listening to the morning news droning from the radio in the kitchen. The announcer's voice was steady, almost bored, until he hit a certain name. Eric Collins, former senior executive at Brighton & Cole Financial, has been placed on indefinite leave amid an internal audit. Sources cite potential mismanagement and violations of federal compliance laws. I didn't flinch. I just kept shaving, smooth, even strokes. That was the sound of the world catching up to a man who thought he was untouchable. By mid-afternoon, Ron called again. Eric's officially out, fired, no severance, no letter of recommendation. They're severing ties hard. Any legal charges? Not yet, Ron said, but the regulators are sniffing around. They're building something. Could be fraud, could be worse. You got him exactly where you wanted. Not yet, I said, but I will. I hung up and sat in the living room, surrounded by the quiet hum of a house that used to feel like home. It didn't anymore, not since Emily died. I hadn't stepped into our bedroom since the night I got the call from the hospital. She was gone. No more visits, no more silent moments holding her hand. Just a cold hospital sheet and a nurse with sorry eyes. I kept the door closed. I couldn't face the emptiness yet, but I kept the ring in my pocket. That night, I wrote the final draft of the lawsuit. It took me hours. Every page was a record of sacrifice. Every line detailed what I'd given. College tuition, down payments on their homes, Laura's wedding, Eric's first investment account, the car he wrecked at 19, the one I replaced without a word. Over $300,000 across 2 decades. And in the end, they gave us nothing back. Not a visit, not a dollar, not a single moment of comfort while Emily faded away. Ron reviewed the documents and said, "This is strong. You want to go public?" I nodded. Then tomorrow we file and you'll hit them where it really hurts. The next day we filed. A civil suit. Full repayment demand, every cent itemized, filed publicly, on record. Within 48 hours, I started getting texts. Ron sent the first one, "Eric knows, he's livid." Then another, "Laura's lawyer just called, she's hysterical." I didn't answer either of them. I went to the cemetery instead. Emily's headstone had just been installed. I stood in front of it, hands in my coat pockets, watching the wind blow through the trees above. "I told you I'd take care of it," I whispered. And I meant it. As I turned to leave, my phone rang. I checked the screen. It was Laura. I let it ring until voicemail picked up. Then it rang again. Eric. Same story, then again. Laura. I finally picked up. Her voice cracked the moment she spoke. "Dad, please, what is this? Why are you suing us? How could you?" I didn't respond. I let her talk. "You're going to ruin us," she sobbed. "My life's already in pieces. Why would you want to bury me? We're your kids." "You buried your mother," I said flatly. "Now it's your turn to feel it. Please, Dad, can't we just talk? You're our father. You had your chance to be my children. You failed." I hung up before she could respond. Then I stood in the middle of the cemetery with the wind tearing through my coat and let myself feel nothing. No regret, no guilt, just resolve. The fight was nearly over, but one final blow still waited. The courtroom, the verdict, the world hearing the truth loud and clear. The morning of the hearing, I woke before the alarm even buzzed. I'd barely slept, not from nerves, but from the weight of what was coming. The final step in a war I never wanted, but refused to walk away from. I dressed in the same suit I wore to Emily's funeral, black, simple, nothing flashy. She used to say I looked sharp in it. I adjusted the tie in the mirror and reached into my coat pocket, where I kept her ring. I clutched it in my fist for a second before sliding it back into place. Her presence still gave me strength. At the courthouse, Ron was already waiting. He didn't say much, just gave me a firm nod as we walked inside together. The courtroom was small, but full. Reporters, curious onlookers, a few familiar faces from the neighborhood, and them, Eric and Laura, sitting stiffly at the defendant's table with their lawyers, pale, worn down, their confidence long gone. I didn't flinch when I saw them. I didn't speak. I walked to my seat with the same calm I'd had every day, by Emily's hospital bed. Cold, focused. The judge called the case. Robert Collins versus Eric Collins and Laura Collins. Civil suit seeking repayment of financial support totaling $312,000. A murmur swept through the room. Eric shifted in his seat. Laura's hands trembled in her lap. Their lawyer stood and tried to argue it was parental duty, that support wasn't something a father could invoice. But Ron stood tall and unshaken. "This isn't about parenting, Your Honor. This is about betrayal, neglect, moral abandonment. Mr. Collins gave his children everything. They left their dying mother to suffer alone. That's not family. That's a transaction gone cold." The judge turned to me. "Mr. Collins, you may speak." I stood, unfolding the speech I'd rewritten 100 times, but I didn't read it. I looked straight at them. "I don't want your money," I began. "I want the truth on record, that your mother died without hearing your voices, that I begged you for help, and you told me she was my problem." Laura covered her face. Eric stared down at the table. "I sold my car, drained our retirement, emptied every account to try and save her. And you sat in your glass towers and marble kitchens and said nothing, did nothing. This is not revenge. This is a reckoning." The room was still. "I don't expect to see the money," I said, voice steady. "But I want you to live every day knowing you were sued by your father, not for debt, but for failing as human beings." When I sat down, even the judge looked shaken. After deliberation, the ruling came. In favor of the plaintiff, full repayment plus interest to be determined. Judgment is final. The gavel came down like thunder. Eric stood suddenly, rage boiling over. You ruined us. I stood too, met his eyes. No, son. You did that yourself. Laura sobbed openly now, clutching her lawyer's arm like a lifeline. Her whole body shook. The girl who once danced in our kitchen on Christmas Eve was now crumbling under the weight of her own choices. As I walked out of that courtroom, people parted like waves. No one clapped, no one spoke. But they all watched, and I didn't look back. Outside, the cold wind hit my face like a baptism. Clean, real. Ron caught up to me on the steps. You sure you're all right? I nodded. It's done. They'll never forget this day. He didn't ask what I'd do next. He didn't need to. I had one more place to go. Not for them. For her. I left the courthouse and drove straight to the cemetery. No music, no radio. Just the sound of the wind scraping against the windows and the faint hum of the engine. The road blurred beneath me like water, and for the first time in weeks my chest didn't feel like it was about to cave in. The gates creaked as I pushed them open. Gravel crunched under my shoes as I walked the familiar path to her grave. The marble headstone caught the pale afternoon sun, her name carved deep and clean, Emily Collins, beloved wife, cherished mother. The grass around it had grown back soft and even. She would have liked that. I stood there for a long time, didn't speak, didn't move, just breathed. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out the ring, her ring, the one she wore through every fight, every laugh, every heartbreak and holiday. I held it up to the light, the gold catching just enough of the sun to glow. Then I bent down and set it gently on top of the stone. It's done, I said. I sat down in the grass, legs stiff, back aching. Didn't care. I needed her to hear me. I didn't do it for revenge, Emily. I did it because they made you feel forgotten. They turned their backs when you needed them most. I couldn't stop the cancer, but I sure as hell made sure they didn't forget what they did. A breeze swept through the trees, stirring the leaves. It felt like her hand brushing my shoulder. For a second, I almost believed she was there. They'll remember you now, I whispered, not as the woman they left behind, but as the mother who loved them anyway, and the wife who gave me the strength to do what they couldn't. I sat there until the sky began to darken, the light fading into that blue-gray dusk that always reminded me of fall football games and Sunday evening walks. I remembered her laugh during those walks, soft and real. That laugh had built my world. Back in the car, I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked older than I remembered, tired, but clear. There was no more plan, no more strategy, no more list of steps to take. For the first time in a long while, I had nothing left to execute, and that was a strange kind of peace. When I got home, I didn't go to the kitchen table. I went to the bedroom, the one I hadn't stepped into since she died. The scent of her still lingered faintly, lavender and lemon. Her sweater hung on the back of the chair untouched. The bed was made, her side exactly the way she left it. I sat down slowly, reaching out to smooth the quilt she made the year after Laura was born, every square stitched with the care of a woman who believed love was something you made with your hands. And then, without thinking, I laid back on her side of the bed. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. Justice wasn't about fireworks. It wasn't about shouting or revenge or even court rulings. It was about silence, the kind that comes when everything settles and the truth stands on its own. They would rebuild, Eric and Laura. Maybe. Maybe not. That wasn't my concern anymore. I'd kept my promise. I protected her name. I held the line when nobody else would. And now I could finally rest. In the quiet of that room, I closed my eyes, and for the first time in months, I let sleep take me. When I woke up the next morning, the sun was already pouring through the blinds. For the first time in what felt like years, I hadn't tossed or turned, no nightmares, no twisted dreams of hospital beeps or courtroom glares, just sleep, solid and still. I sat on the edge of the bed, running my hands through my hair. The house was dead quiet, no text alerts, no calls from Ron, no panic from Eric, No desperate voicemails from Laura. Just quiet. And God, it felt strange. I made myself coffee the way Emily liked it. Black, strong, no sugar. I never drank it that way before, but now I did. Every morning since she passed, it was my way of sitting with her, my way of remembering. I sat at the kitchen table, flipping through the mail, bills, junk, a flyer for roofing services, then a small envelope with no return address. I opened it slowly. Inside a card, nothing fancy, plain white, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Laura. Dad, you don't have to forgive me. I don't deserve it. I failed her. I failed you. But I needed you to know. After court, I went to the cemetery. I sat there for hours. I told her everything. I'm sorry. I'm trying to fix what I broke. Even if you never speak to me again, I'll keep trying. Laura. I set the card down and stared at it for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't soften. But a part of me shifted. Just slightly. Later that day, Ron called. So, what now? I leaned back in my chair, the creak familiar. Now? I breathe. I live. That's what Emily would have wanted. You sure you don't want to push it further? Garnishments, liens, we can keep squeezing. No, I said. It's not about blood. It was never about blood. He was quiet for a beat. Then he laughed. You're a better man than I am. No, I said. I'm just done being angry. After the call, I went to the garage for the first time in months. Dust had settled over the shelves, but her garden tools still hung neatly. Emily loved her rose bushes. Even when chemo made her too weak to stand, she'd sit outside and stare at them for hours. I pulled on gloves and grabbed the pruning shears. It was spring now. The bushes were wild, overgrown, thirsty for someone to care. I spent the whole afternoon out there, cutting, trimming, watering. By the time I finished, the sun had started to dip low, casting that warm amber light she always said made the yard feel like a painting. I stood back and took it in. For a second, I felt her behind me, just a breath, a presence, the way love lingers when the body's long gone. I turned around, and there, standing at the edge of the driveway, was Eric. He looked smaller, not in height, but in presence. Like the weight he used to carry, the power, the pride, had all been stripped away. Can I talk to you? He asked. I didn't answer, just kept looking at him. He walked closer. I know you don't owe me a damn thing, and I deserve all of this. Maybe more. I was selfish, cold, but I've lost everything, Dad. And for once, I'm not blaming anyone else. Still, I said nothing. I don't expect forgiveness, Day, he added, but I needed to look you in the eye and tell you, I'm sorry, for all of it. He looked down, then back up. I miss her. I nodded, slow. I do too. He stood there a moment longer, then, without pushing, he turned and walked back to his car. He didn't beg. He didn't expect. And somehow, that meant more than anything he'd ever said. That night, after Eric left, I sat on the porch with a blanket over my knees and a cup of coffee growing cold in my hand. The stars were faint, scattered above the quiet suburban street. The wind was light, peaceful. But peace is a strange thing when it comes after war. I replayed his words in my head. I miss her. There was no defense in his voice, no excuses, just raw truth. For the first time in a long while, he sounded like my son. But I didn't feel relief. Not exactly. What I felt was something harder to name. Closure, maybe. The beginning of it. The next morning, I walked down to the corner store for the paper. The guy behind the counter, Greg, nodded like always, handed me my usual without a word. But I caught the glance, quick, respectful. People had read about the case. I could feel it everywhere now. The silence. The way folks looked but didn't ask. It was in the air. Back home, I opened the paper, flipped past the headlines until I found it. Local father wins case against children over terminally ill wife's abandonment. Below it, a photo of me outside the courthouse, stone-faced, suit tight across my shoulders, the ring just barely visible through my pocket. I didn't read the whole article. I didn't need to. I'd lived every word. Just as I folded the paper shut, the doorbell rang. It was Laura. She stood on the porch, hair pulled back, no makeup, eyes red and puffy. She looked exhausted. Her hands trembled as she held out a small box. "I don't expect you to take this," she said quietly, "but it's everything I could sell, jewelry, designer stuff. I don't want it anymore. I want to start clean." I didn't reach for it. Not right away. "I read your letter," I told her, "and I believe you meant it, but believing you doesn't erase what happened." She nodded. "I know, and I'm not asking for that. I needed to face you. Face this. I don't want to live in denial anymore." Her voice cracked at the edges. I visited her grave. I stayed there all night. I told her how sorry I was, how wrong I was. I think I said it 100 times. Did she answer? She gave a soft laugh through tears. "No, but I heard her anyway." I stepped aside. She didn't expect it, but she walked in, slow, cautious, like the house might collapse under her feet. She looked around at the walls, the furniture, the photos, like each piece held something sacred. We sat at the table in silence for a long time. "I still remember when you were 5, I said finally. "You had that pink sweater with the rabbit on it. You used to insist on wearing it even in July." She smiled. "Mom hated that sweater." "She did, but she never made you take it off. She let you be stubborn, loved you through it." "I didn't deserve her," she whispered. "None of us ever really did." I didn't say I forgave her. I didn't say things were okay. But when she reached across the table and put her hand over mine, I didn't pull away. We sat there until the sun dipped behind the trees, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel entirely alone. She left the box on the kitchen counter. "I'll keep showing up," she said at the door. "Even if you don't answer, even if it takes years, I'll be here." And then she was gone. I stared at that box for a long time. I didn't open it, didn't need to. It wasn't what was inside that mattered. It was that she left it behind. The next few days passed slowly, not heavy, not light, just quiet. The kind of quiet that seeps into your bones and settles there, not as grief, not as anger, but as something steadier, something that waits. I left Laura's box untouched on the counter. Every time I walked past it, I'd glance at it, think about opening it, then keep walking. It wasn't about what was inside. It was the fact that she gave it up, that she left it. That meant more than the contents ever could. Each morning I made coffee and sat by the window. The garden had started blooming again. Emily's roses, pink and full, had survived the winter. I didn't touch them now. I'd just let them grow wild. She would have loved that. Then out of nowhere, a letter arrived. Certified mail, thick envelope. The return address, Eric's attorney. I opened it slowly, expecting fire, threats, another attempt to claw back some control, but it wasn't any of that. Inside, a letter from Eric, no lawyer speak, no legal jargon, just him. "Dad, I know the judgment stands. I'm not fighting it. I've started selling off my assets, what's left of them. I'll pay you back, every dollar, even if it takes the rest of my life. But more than that, I needed you to know I've stepped down from everything. No more clients, no more offices. I've gone back to working at a firm in Joliet, small-time stuff, entry-level. But I want to earn something again, honestly this time. I know none of this makes up for what I did, but I'm trying. I miss her every day. I see her face every time I walk past a mirror. I don't think that'll ever go away. If it's too late, I understand. But I'll keep sending the checks. No contact, no strings. Just repayment. Eric." I read it twice. Then I folded it up and set it beside Laura's box. No calls, no responses. I wasn't ready for that. Not yet. But I didn't throw it away either. Later that evening, I went for a walk, just down to the park a few blocks away, the same one we used to take the kids to when they were little. I passed the swing set where Laura once skinned her knee and Emily kissed it better. The bench where Eric learned to ride a bike and crashed straight into the trash can. Those memories were real. They hadn't changed. And maybe, just maybe, The people inside them hadn't vanished entirely either. I sat down on the bench, the wood cool beneath me, and just watched the world go by. A little girl with tangled hair chased her brother through the set of grass, their mom trailing behind with a juice box in one hand and a diaper bag slung over her shoulder. She looked exhausted, but she smiled. God, she smiled like it was the best day of her life. I closed my eyes and let the breeze hit my face. When I got home, I stood in front of the bedroom door again. I opened it, not slowly, not hesitantly, just opened it. The room was still hers, still ours. I sat on the edge of the bed and picked up one of her scarves, the one she wore on that trip to Oregon, the last vacation we ever took together. It smelled faintly of her shampoo, lavender, and chamomile. I held it to my face. I didn't cry. I didn't collapse. But I felt something shift. I was tired of war. I was tired of carrying anger like armor. Maybe letting go didn't mean forgiving. Maybe it didn't mean forgetting. Maybe it just meant opening the door and walking back into the parts of life that still had breath left in them. I folded the scarf and placed it gently back on the pillow. Then I turned off the light and let the quiet hold me. A week later, I got a call I didn't expect. It was from a number I didn't recognize, but something told me to answer it anyway. When I did, I heard a voice I hadn't heard in nearly 6 years. Tom Harland, old friend, former colleague, one of the few men who ever saw me lose my temper during a union meeting and lived to laugh about it. "Robert," he said, "heard about the trial. Damn bold. I read every word." "Didn't do it for the headline," I replied. "I know. That's why I'm calling." He asked to meet. Nothing formal, no agenda. Just two old men, one who lit a fire, the other who still remembered how warm that fire used to be. We met at a diner in Joliet, same one we used to sneak out to during long shifts, back when we still believed hard work alone could fix everything. He was waiting with 2 coffees already on the table, both black. "You look better than I expected," he said, grinning. "Death in court don't leave much time for self-care," I said. He nodded. "I meant better inside. You look lighter." I thought about that for a second. Maybe I am, not happy, but cleaner. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small folder. "Ron sent me this. Said you might want to know how things are settling." I opened it. Inside, updates on the repayments. Laura had made her first 2 payments. Modest, but consistent. No skip dates, no excuses. Eric had done the same. His new job wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, reliable. He was keeping his word. I closed the folder and slid it back. "I'm not cashing those checks anytime soon." "Why not?" Tom asked. "Because for the first time in years, they're learning how to carry weight. Let 'em." He smiled, then leaned back. "So, what now, Robert?" I stirred my coffee, watching the cream swirl into the black. "Now? I think I go fishing." He barked a laugh. "You still got that rusty old tackle box? In the garage under the lawn chairs." "Well," he said, standing, "bring it next Saturday. We'll see if anything still bites out at Miller Lake." I shook his hand and watched him leave, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time, forward motion. Back home, I cleared the coffee table, stacked the legal pad, the lawsuit paperwork, the old receipts, all of it, and tucked them into a drawer. Not to throw away, just to store. Then I finally opened Laura's box. Inside, a note, a stack of pawn tickets, a couple of photos, one of her and Emily baking cookies, both of them covered in flour and laughing, and a single silver bracelet I gave her on her 12th birthday. She kept it all those years. It was tarnished, but still intact. I placed the bracelet on the mantel beside Emily's photo, not as a trophy, as a sign that maybe something wasn't entirely broken, maybe some things could bend instead of snap. That evening I sat on the porch again. The street was quiet, the breeze soft. I could smell someone grilling down the block. Kids' laughter echoed faintly from somewhere out back. I leaned back and looked at the stars. Maybe the world hadn't changed. Maybe the people around me had only just started seeing it clearly. Maybe that was enough. Then the doorbell rang. I stood, stretched, and opened the door. It was both of them, Eric and Laura. No lawyers, no begging, no gifts, just them. "Can we come in?" Eric asked. I looked at them for a long moment. Then I stepped aside, didn't say yes, didn't say no, just held the door open and let whatever came next walk in. They stepped inside like strangers, like guests unsure of the welcome they didn't expect but hoped for anyway. Eric took off his shoes at the door without being asked. Laura clutched a small notebook in her hand, something about it tight and deliberate, like she didn't trust herself to speak without notes. I walked past them, didn't say a word, just motioned to the living room. They followed. The house was the same. Same couch Emily picked out at a Labor Day sale 20 years ago. Same old lamp by the side table. The same faint scent of lemon polish and rose petals clung to the air. Faint, but always there. They sat down without looking at each other. Eric spoke first. "We're not here to undo what happened, Chase," he said. "We know we can't." Laura nodded. "We're not asking you to forget either. We want to be better for Mom, for you, for ourselves." I sat across from them, arms crossed, not cold, just measured. Eric looked at the bookshelf, his voice quieter now. "Do you remember when you took me to that job fair in 8th grade? The one with the college booths? You told me, doesn't matter how smart you are, if no one trusts you, you've got nothing. I ignored that. I thought power made people trust you. But now I get it. Trust is something you can't buy back. You earn it, every damn day." Laura opened her notebook, hands trembling. "I wrote her letters, a few of them. I know she'll never read them, but I needed to say things out loud. I wanted to show them to you, if you're ever ready. I didn't reach for them, but I didn't tell her to put them away either. I lied to her," I said, "every day near the end. Told her you two were asking about her. Told her you sent love. You know what that did to me?" Eric looked down, ashamed. "I hated you for making me lie to her, but I hated myself more for making it so easy to believe you'd never come." Laura started crying, softly, no theatrics, no defense. Eric's voice cracked. "I never thought she'd actually go, Dad. I thought there'd be time. I told myself she'd be fine because I didn't want to face what it meant if she wasn't. She needed you," I said, "and you failed her." "I know," he whispered. The room went quiet. The clock ticked. The fridge hummed. Finally, I spoke again. "You're not forgiven." They both froze. "But I'm not shutting the door either. You want to be better? Then be better. Not just for me, for her. For yourselves. That's the only way you'll earn your way back." They nodded, slow, absorbing every word. "And this isn't going to be fixed in a few visits and some checks. It'll take years, maybe a lifetime. You ready for that?" Eric looked me in the eye. "Yes," Laura wiped her eyes. "Whatever it takes." I stood up, walked to the kitchen, grabbed 3 coffee mugs. 2 were chipped. One had Emily's favorite saying etched on the side, "Do it with love or don't do it at all." I handed them mugs, poured the coffee, and sat back down. We didn't talk much after that. We just sat. And for once, the silence wasn't heavy. It was necessary. When they left, Laura hugged me, not tight, not long, just enough to say, "I'm still here." Eric shook my hand, firm, steady. They walked to their cars, no promises, no fake smiles, but something real. Inside, I picked up the letters she left on the table. I didn't open them right away. I would, eventually, not for answers, but because they were written with something I thought I'd never see again from them. Effort. And maybe, just maybe, love.